we have Mr. Wayne Gray from DMI. We have Dr. David Harwood. In addition to myself, we have, right, the boss herself, the person that does all the work. Yeah. Mrs. White's on with us this evening as a co-host, right? I'm going to try and get her to say not an awful lot. Make a change. David's already asked to turn the volume down. I said I've been asking her to do that for 35 years. We'll see where we go with that. So good evening. I know that looking down the list that of the people that have registered, I know there are a lot of people on here this evening that have never been on before. So if you've never been on here before, right, don't worry, we don't bite. Hopefully this evening you'll get a lot of good learning. I've got a special surprise for you as well. It's special to me. It might not be to you. It is for me a little bit later. But we are very, very relaxed. If you've got any questions, please put them in the question box. One or the other of us, either David, Janette or myself, will pick those questions up as we go along. Because if they're about HMOs, right, can you make sure that you put in the chat that it goes to David, and about anything else, either administration, it goes to Janette. Anything that's easy to answer, please send them to me. It's not a problem. Okay. So to the new people that have never been here before, quick introduction. That's my wife in the top right hand corner. Give us a wave, Janette. That's enough. Thank you. Don't build up your part. My name is Barry White, and David and I set up this thing with another gentleman actually called Craig Phillips, who we've not seen for a while. About just over 12 months ago. Well, a little bit longer than that actually. And the aim was to put speakers on that gave you a bit of information that not the normal people. So again, if you've just joined us, we've had Paul Champlina from Landlord Action. We've had people from Shawbrook, from Kent Reliance. We've had Shimon Rudich, people like that. They are all available. If you've not seen them, if you've only just joined us, they are all available on the YouTube channel that you should, as a member of National Property Networks, have access to anyway. So if you haven't, then by all means have a chat to Mrs. White, and she will make sure that you've got access to them. Guys, when you come in, can you make sure you mute yourself, please?
Harry, can you unmute yourself? I
yeah,
just muted
okay,
everybody.
then. So yes.
Right. I don't know where that was coming from. There's still loads and loads of people.
Yeah, I'll do that.
Guys, when you come in, can you mute yourself, please? Guys.
Yeah, it's a lot easier when you sit beforehand. Yes, yeah.
Right, I've just muted everybody again, David, so you'll need to unmute yourself when you start speaking.
There we go, yeah.
It's when new people come in that it throws the group mute off. So, as I was saying, my name is Barry White. I've been around property for about 11 years now. I specialise in all sorts of things, particularly training lease options. Janette and I have got quite a large portfolio. Janette specialises in numbers and sourcing and stuff like that. But we we will get straight into the presentation, I think, because it is the turn of my very, very good friend and colleague, training colleague as well, Dr. David Harwood this evening. Most of you will have seen him as a co-host, but he actually teaches HMOs, knows a little bit about them. He actually knows probably too much, but that's another thing. And what we wanted to do this evening is give you a bit of regulation stuff and a bit of a conversation, probably between David, myself, and Wayne, about where we think the future of HMOs are going. Certainly, when we get to Wayne, one of the biggest issues, and Wayne and I had a conversation about this last week. One of the biggest issues with you as investors is that at what point does an HMO become flagged up by the lenders? At what point can we get a valuation on a commercial valuation in HMO? And all the sort of tiny little things, and how the process works when you apply for a mortgage with one of the lenders, whether it's Shawbrook, Oldham or Kent, etc., etc., etc. Yeah. So that is what we're going to try and address a little bit this evening. So, David, it's over to you.
Right, I shall do my best to share the screen. Bear with me. Let's hope we get this technology right. Let's pop it to the beginning. Hopefully what you can see is just a single blue screen. Is that correct, Barry? Right, now I can't see anybody. So can you just indicate that you can see the blue screen?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, but great. Thank you very much. Okay, so my name's David Harwood. I herald from a background of being a university head of department, head of engineering, and head of mathematics, and head of computing. So that's quite a lot. They were all in the same department, of course, but it sounds better to make it sound like three. And I spent 22 years doing that, working extremely hard for a very small amount of money. So at the same time, my wife got involved in mortgage broking long time ago, back in the sort of mid 1990s. And she discovered a lot of people making an income from property, and she was selling them lots of mortgage. And of course, selling them lots of mortgages was very profitable. Thank you very much. Due to the proc fees and due to the fees that the broker charged as well, and that did extremely well. But Shirley said, "Well, okay, well, I think there's something more to this," and went and found out. And I was too busy being a head of department in a university to worry about property, so I didn't really want to get that interested, to be honest. And I was enjoying myself. I was head of my own little unit and doing a lot of research. My research was into automatically guided vehicles and robotics, which is great fun. But it didn't earn a lot of money. And Shirley was earning a lot more than I was just selling mortgages. So she went and found out a lot more about property and went on a course. I didn't go on the course. I was too busy in university. I was doing something in the region of 90 hours a week working in the university. There's only 168 of them in total. So there you go. And she went out on a mentorship. She had a mentor, quite a well-known mentor called Jill. And she bought 4 HMOs, straight in, no hassle, 4 HMOs. And they propelled us to financial freedom almost in one go. But we had no money, so we didn't know how we were going to put down deposits or whatever. And we found a benefactor who lent us £150,000, and that turned out to be my mum-in-law. Now my mum-in-law lives in Spain. I thought it was a good place for her to go. And and she had a house in an unencumbered property, and we raised a mortgage on that because that's what my wife does. and we bought these 4 HMOs, and they brought in something in the region of £8,500 to £9,000 a month, which is way over the top of what we were earning. So we were propelled to financial freedom very quickly. So in 2000, now that was in 2002, I actually gave up teaching mathematics and stuff in 2009, and I retired to a life of luxury. And so that was great. So it's brilliant. And, we've never looked back. I then started to do some training with a company based in the US and then in London. And that's when I taught Barry and Janette, and they came on the course for doing ordinary properties, and then I think they did HMOs then, and so I have the privilege of teaching Barry. And of course, as you know, the rest is history, because Barry is now a very successful trainer and mentor as well. So I do take some credit for that. What we're going to look at this evening is the future of HMOs as I see it. Now, I am not going to try and teach you too much about HMOs. We are going to look at the definition. Why shouldn't we? But it's important that, a lot of people are asking questions now about, is the age of the HMO dead? Well, I'll tell you now, before I get into it, I don't think it is. But I do think you have to take care, because there's a lot of legislation getting in the way. And I have the feeling in the not too distant future, just as Wales has done and Scotland have done, that all investors will have to register when they have property to let. And I greatly suspect they'll all have to take courses. So I'm an accredited landlord through the NRLA, and that's a great thing to be. I've actually got to update my CPD or do the test again. It's not really a problem. You can do that if you're a member of the NRLA. So that's a great thing to do. And it's recognised in Wales and it's recognised in Scotland. And of course, you don't need to be registered in England at this moment in time, but I greatly suspect it'll come. So, oh dear, it's not moving on. That's not good, is it? It's making a lot of noise. And I've lost my mouse.
David, click on your presentation and then it'll move on.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to do. But my mouse has disappeared. Oh, there it is. There we go. So I'm going to do the key objectives for this evening are the definition of an HMO, the pros and cons, the situation today, what about the future, the factors affecting HMOs, that would be tenants, council tax, Article 4, planning, and most important of all, a lot of people miss out the maintenance factor. So I want to talk a little bit about that. Key due diligence. So what do you need to do? So we need to check for tenants. We need to look at area requirements. We need to think about the council because, we've got licensing in the way. But we also need to think about, well, what happens to the property when it's of no more use to us? I have a rule in property, and that's every property in my portfolio has to have a reason for being there. And once that reason no longer exists, then it's maybe time to get rid of the property. So we're going to do that. We're going to take a little bit of a jaunt around, and I'm going to leave this a little bit to Wayne at the end when he comes on to do his slot, which is financing opportunities. But I also want to sort of just hint to you about where we found money when we've been doing the properties. I'm going to take a look at the key legal aspects because they're important. I mean, you don't want to get fined if you don't have a license, and you should do because it's unlimited. So I need to talk about those. I would be not doing my job properly. Well, I haven't got a job. I wouldn't be, being an HMO trainer if I didn't tell you about the licensing, something about the standards. I am not going to go through them. That's a 3-day course in its own right, and that's something for another day. Oh, there we go. Something's gone wrong there. There we go. I love technology. I'm going to talk about layout and format very, very briefly. We don't have time to do all sorts. Perhaps that's something for another day, is to get you to actually lay out an HMO. I'm going to talk about small ones, medium ones, and large ones, and how I feel about those when I'm doing it. And I'm going to do something on the numbers, but I'm not going to do any maths. Now you're probably saying, how on earth is he going to do that? I'm going to be talking a lot about, what you need to be thinking about when it comes to due diligence. We're going to be thinking about valuation. We're going to be thinking about bricks and mortar commercial finance, or is it a mix, a semi-commercial product? If you want the maths, do Janette's course. I watched it the other day as the first instance, and it's smack on the button and tells you exactly what you need to know and do. And I'm going to say something very briefly about marketing your HMO, because this is becoming more and more key in terms of generating an income. So ensure your property is better than the competitions. I mean, there's so much out there now. We've been teaching a lot of people about HMOs. I've been teaching it for nearly 19 years. I wrote the very first HMO course back in 2003. And so it's been around some considerable time. So there's a lot of people out there who are building their HMOs, and hope some of them are making a fantastic job of it. And some of them, I have to say, think that, well, it depends who we let it to. I don't think it matters who you let it to. It needs to be better than the competitions. And so I'm going to be talking a little bit about that. Okay, let's have a look at the definition, because a lot of people get this wrong. And I wish I'd had £1 for every single time somebody's come up to me and saying, I've got 3 people who don't know each other living in my house, and I've been told an HMO is for 5 people. Well, it's not. So let me just go through it. Okay, so it's a building or flat. So it doesn't have to be it doesn't have to be a house. It could be a conversion, or it could be a flat. Probably. And in Scotland, there's lots of these tenement buildings, and the flats are 3 and 4 bedrooms, and they can be HMOs, and we have them too, of course, but we don't call them that. In which 2 or more households share a basic amenity, such as a bathroom. So if you've got 2 or more households, now you'll see in a moment that when it says 2 or more households, it means actually 3 or more people, because the rules specifically say that 2, as long as there's only 2, is not an HMO. That's one of the things in the Housing Act 2004. May not be the case in Scotland. So do. If you're investing in Scotland, be a little bit careful, and I will go and talk to the local council, because they have a different, although the rules are very similar up there, they're a little bit more stiff than they are down in England. It could be a building that's been converted and doesn't entirely comprise of self-contained flats. So I've got one of these. I've got 3 self-contained flats, and the lower floor is 4 rooms, because it didn't lend itself to turning into yet another flat. So the bottom is a 4-bed HMO, and then above that there are a number of self-contained flats. Now, because it was converted some time ago, it's an HMO. So, and I talk a little, I'm just going to mention that. So this is the key bit. The building is occupied by at least 3 people who constitute more than 1 household. So let me tell you a little story. I've got two teachers, both ladies, who teach at the same school. One's the deputy head, the other one's is one of the teachers, and they rent one of my properties in Wales, and they are in a 2-bed property, but there's just 2 of them, so it's not an HMO. One of them goes home every weekend, the other one stays in the property all the time, but one of them goes home because she has a husband and 2 other children. Anyway, one year one time she came back and she rang me up and she said, David, I'm pregnant. I said, congratulations. When are you moving out? And she said, what do you mean moving out? I said, because when you have your baby, are you going to live at home, or are you going to continue doing your job? And she said, well, I'm going to have the baby here. Well, babies, ladies and gentlemen, are rumored to be human. So that would put 3 people in the property, forming 2 households. So she was going to turn one of my properties into an HMO. Well, the HMO license in the town considered was £1,000, and I didn't want to pay £1,000 for the license, because in this particular town in Wales, every single HMO is licensed. It's what we call selective licensing. I mentioned that a little bit later on. So mixed use properties may also constitute HMOs. Also, if you own a building that is all flats, but it was converted using pre-1991 building regulations, then that also could be classed as an HMO, because HMOs were 1991 building regulations were the first regulations that came in that had the fire regulations built into the building regulations. Prior to that, they didn't. And so now that the building regulations contain that, self-contained flats using post-1991 building regulations are generally not classed as HMOs. There is a twist to that, but it's far too complicated to go into tonight. There are a couple of exemptions. If you have a property that's managed or controlled by a private registered social housing, it doesn't come under HMO rules and regulations. Specifically, that could be just England. I haven't checked Wales or Scotland. Local authorities, of course, they're exempt. Why wouldn't they be? Because they make the rules. And other public sector bodies also can come into that. So universities who have halls of residence where they've got lots of students living in their halls of residence are not HMOs. They come under a separate set of regulations. So only occupied, if you are an owner occupier, then you can have two strangers. If we don't call them tenants, we call them lodgers. In this case, I use the word licensees. They are classed just as people, and they're living with you as part of your family, is the way that it's seen. So you can have up to two lodgers living in your house, and that's not classified as an HMO. Specifically, and I did mention this earlier, only occupied if there's two people who form two households, as they would do if they don't know each other, then they are exempt from HMOs. And I have a particular strategy which works along that. Also, if the local authority can be approached and give you an exemption from operating as an HMO, maybe whilst work is being done to a property, etc., etc. Lots of reasons for temporary exemption order, but you need to apply for it. If the local authority, and they have the ability to, they can do this, they can take over your property and manage it if they don't think you're doing a good job, then of course it's now the council that's running it, and of course it's not then an HMO. Okay, so those are the definitions. So the key one I want you to remember is it's 3 or more people forming 2 households. Once you've got that basic definition, there's no 5 people rule. It's a different thing altogether. But once you've got 3 people and 2 households, you have an HMO. End of story. That's what the law says. So if you've got 3 people living with you as lodgers, guess what you have? You have an HMO. Okay. Okay, let's take a look. Some of the pros. So HMOs, why do we do them? Why the rental yields and the returns on investment are normally better than single let properties. I should say normally higher than single let properties. Usually we're looking at better than 12%. I'm usually looking at 15 to 18% if I was using yield. I am not a big fan of the yield calculation, but if I'm looking and the yield is very simple to do, then I'm looking for something sort of 15, 16, 17, 18%. But I then like to do the numbers and work out my return on investment, which is far more telling. But as you can imagine, I get a lot of properties coming across my desk from Rightmove, Zoopla, Boom, and all of those other different web pages. I've got agents who send me stuff, and if I'm looking for an HMO, then I'm looking for something where the yield is going to give me at least 15 to 18% as a quick calculation. Once I've decided it's worth going and looking at, well, then I'll go and take a look at it. a few people that could do that. Barry would be a person that I would fully trust in to go and look at one of my HMOs. Once I've got him to sign a confidentiality agreement and do all the things that I should do to do that, I noticed that Sam White, I think Barry's daughter-in-law, she sends me a lot of stuff. And I have to do a quick calculation. So I'm looking for higher than 12, but I'm usually looking for 15, 16, 17, 18% or higher. My returns on investment probably don't have to be quite so high today because obviously I can cover the income from other properties. As an HMO landlord, you can let a room on a license. Now, I picked this up off of the Shelter website, and I actually don't agree with them very much. It should be on a tenancy. A license is what you normally get. This is not an HMO license. This is a license to stay in the property. You need to be very careful about this. And I know a number of judges that have said, no, these people that are living in your property are actually on a tenancy. So it's supposed to be easier if you need to evict a tenant. And I've put it in there because in serviced accommodation, the tenants are on a license. But guess what? Serviced accommodation can be very similar to an HMO, which is why it's there. But you need to be careful and you need to understand licenses. I don't have the time to go into all of that. All of my tenants all of my people in my HMO are tenants, and they're on the standard tenancy type agreements. The rental void period. Well, I mean, I've got a number of HMOs that have never had a void. So, I struggle with this one. I don't see why it should have a void. But if you've got multiple people, they don't all come and go at the same time, which is what happens with a buy-to-let family. So if a buy-to-let family leaves, the whole property goes void. With an HMO, they don't. You might get one leave and then somebody else comes in, or you might get a changeover. Yes, you are going to suffer from having much higher turnover in terms of tenants over a period of time, but you're not going to suffer from you still got money coming in to pay the mortgage, to pay the bills, and hopefully to put some cash in your back pocket as well. Less exposure to rent arrears. I was phoned up by a friend of mine, a previous mentee of mine, just yesterday. He's a very respected doctor in London. He's a consultant in A&E, and he was telling me that he's got a young person who is in one of his HMOs, and she hasn't paid now for 8 months. But he is concerned about it. Very difficult to get them out at the moment because of COVID rules and regulations about not evicting tenants, but less exposure because everybody else in the property is paying. It's a 6-bed, so 5 people are paying. And he says, I'm still putting cash in my back pocket. Now, obviously not putting all of the cash in his back pocket, but he's covering everything. And once the rules allow, that person will probably have to go. And I've indicated several things that he might be able to do because she is maintaining she's lost her job and she's just staying in the property all day. And I said, well, why don't you take her to the council and actually help her to fill in the universal credit forms? And then you might get some of your income back. You won't get the arrears, but he may get paid from now on. And he did that today, and she was very grateful. She didn't think she qualified. She does. And, in 8 weeks' time, he'll start getting some money. So lots of different things that you can do. Okay, but in a single let, you know that arrears miss out on the entire income of the property. If the property requires significant work in order to make it habitable, many of the costs are tax deductible. And there are also some tax efficient methods that you can employ, and you can go to certain companies. One is Landlord Smart, who will lease you your furnishings and some of your white goods, etc., etc. And that all becomes a leasing thing, which is totally tax deductible. So I have a tendency to rent some of my stuff. So we rent our washing machines from a rent a washing machine company, and that's immediately tax deductible. And by the way, I don't suffer from breakdowns because when it breaks down, they just ring the rental company, they come out and fix it. Increasing tenant demand due to growing UK population. Look, the population is growing by something in the region of 5% of 60 million every year. Even under the current regulations, that the population has been growing. I think we're going to have a baby boom in 9 months to a year's time, maybe even sooner. We're looking for flexible. We certainly, looking for, and a lot of people are looking for flexible, and HMOs can be very flexible, affordable. It's more affordable, and I'll go into that a little bit later, in cities and larger towns, if multiple people get together and go and rent into an HMO. So that's great. And actually, the number of people is not getting smaller. There are things being put in the way of HMOs in some towns and cities. I'll talk about that a little bit later on, but some things are being put in the way. But nevertheless, I think there's still a lot of people out there looking. Young professionals, and we're talking about graduates here, so they're really students with money. So you do have to think about that. But young professionals need to be more mobile in today's market. I've got a group of young doctors in a couple of my HMOs, and when they're on their 6-month rotation, one goes, they automatically recommend another one to come in. And the other doctors think it's great because they're getting to meet people that are like-minded. I've got another one which is all nurses, and it's the same for them, although they tend to stay a little bit longer. You may be able to use commercial finance products, which you can't in buy-to-let. But I'm going to talk a little bit about that too. And I'm going to let Wayne also talk about that when he comes to do his mortgage slot, because you need to do your due diligence. Sometimes commercial, I've heard it said commercial finance products. Oh, I must go commercial finance. It can be incredibly dangerous just to think in those terms. So, when we come to do the due diligence, that's what we're going to be looking at. Let's take a look at some of the cons. First of all, an HMO has a higher startup cost than a typical buy-to-let. I mean, we've got to fit a fire alarm, we've got to fit fire doors. We may have to buy a license. We may have to put a higher number of bathrooms into the property. Some people will go on all en suite. I've never done that, but these costs all add up. The properties also need to be to a very good standard as well. Now, we only do things to a good standard, but you also have to furnish the property, and it could mean that you have to increase the safety of the property as well, and it has to be a fit and proper place to live in. So under the Housing Health and Safety Rating System, the council are going to look at about 6 or 7 major different types of hazards that you get when you are looking at letting out the property, especially when it needs a license. And we'll come on to that as well. HMO landlords are typically responsible for paying and managing the bills. Now, okay, if you are going to pay the bills on behalf of your tenants, by the way, that's a great thing for tenants, then that can be recouped because you're going to charge a higher rent. So I have a rent part of my rent. I also have a bills part of my rent, which typically works somewhere between £15 and £20 per week per tenant on top of there. So if I have a rent which you say £85 a month, then typically I'm going to be charging £85 a week. I'm going to typically be talking about £100 to £105 per week when I'm paying the bills. So that's something that's important that you must do. HMOs demand more legislation. They also may need planning requirements compared to a more straightforward buy-to-let. I can almost go buy a house anywhere, and I can turn it into a let property if it works. Well, you can turn any property into a buy-to-let property. It doesn't necessarily give you a cash flow, but any property could be buy-to-let, and the rules are not so strict. But in HMOs, there is a lot of legislation in the way. It can be harder to obtain finance as a first-time HMO investor, and a larger deposit is often required. You can get 75% loan to value. You may have to pay higher rates. These days, of course, we buy it through a limited company, and the rates might be you know, a 0.5 to 1% more or whatever. I'm sure Wayne can cover that when he does his bit. Oh. Not every property can work as an HMO. Not every property can work as an HMO. We could turn some properties into HMOs, but they're not going to work because they're not in the right area. There's no tenant demand. It could be that the rooms are too small. So you might get a 3-bedroomed house, but there's one box room which you can't use. You might only have one room downstairs. That's not going to make a great HMO. I mean, I haven't got any 3-bed HMOs. So I tend to, 5 is my lowest, then 6. And I don't do the larger ones, as you'll see later on. Possibly restricted capital growth. People think because they're going to spend £30,000, £40,000 doing up a property and turning it into an HMO, they're going to add a lot of value to that property. That is not generally true. You're going to get a higher cash flow, hopefully, but it doesn't mean to say that it's going to be higher capital growth, because it limits what you can do with it after you've done the property up. Can it then be turned back into a home is the major question. And therefore, that restricts the marketplace to only people who want to buy HMOs. Now, if your property has been converted to an HMO and something happens in that area, all of a sudden its value is going to drop. So you cannot buy HMOs and guarantee capital growth. It is not necessarily the case, because you're going to have specialized landlords are the only ones interested in buying it. A tenant is only responsible for their room, not the common areas, which means that if it's damaged, it may be difficult to prove who caused it. Now, I am going to talk about maintenance. I think it's a key element. You must create a pot of money to maintain your HMOs. You can't just rely on your MO, your monthly operating expenses. It is not going to be enough. I've certainly had tenants that have destroyed furniture, wrecked it because they had a party. Of course, they all denied they did it, and it was all the people in the party that did it. It's in the common areas, so it's very difficult to prove it. Now, there are ways around that. You can issue a bill to everybody. You can take out insurance. You can do a lot of things to do it. But of course, these things all add to the expense. Now, I have a rule in my HMOs, and that's that anyone under the age of 25, the most likely people to cause damage, to be honest, you know, graduates who are students with money, still have their parties, still do it, still do that. I get them to supply a guarantor. And this is where management becomes a key issue in looking after your property. I do not manage any of my HMOs. I don't want the day-to-day issues. It's a job. I don't want a job. I don't like jobs. I love doing what I'm doing, and that's relaxing. I live near the beach, so I can go and have a pina colada on the beach at any time. Bit cold today, mind. Tenant turnover, however, can be higher. And you also get groups of people living together. Their dynamic doesn't always gel. That you can be assured of. So there can be issues, and you have to be on top of that together with your managing stroke letting agent. That's key. You have to have a really great working relationship with your managing agent. Oh, and by the way, you have to have a license if you're renting out an HMO with 5 or more people in it. And failure to have a license is an unlimited fine. So if you need a license, you've got 5 people or more living in it, you must do the property up. I think you do every HMO up to the same standard. You still fit fire doors and fire alarms, even in a 3-4 bed HMO. But if you've got 5, you must have a license, and they know about it, because if there's a complaint, they'll come after you, and it's an unlimited fine. There may be local permitted planning restrictions. So Article 4 direction, you've heard about it. It's Article 4 direction, Part 1. It's to do with HMOs, and it's to do with the conservation of a family area was why it was brought in. Actually, I think it was brought in because a minister didn't want students living next to him. But so there might be permitted developing planning restrictions on you getting your HMO, and it's called Article 4. We'll mention it again, I'm sure. Okay, 2 major questions. After COVID, are HMOs dead or in decline? Key question. A lot of people think that during the COVID, people didn't want to share with other people because they might get COVID. Not true. I've got HMOs that have stayed full. In fact, they conserved their bubble, whatever a bubble is. If there's a recession, and we've talked about it with National Property Networks, we talked about the possibility of a recession. Well, are HMOs dead? So let's just take a look at some of these reasons. In my opinion, now this is my opinion, I have a crystal ball, ladies and gentlemen. I didn't bring it with me, but it's very foggy at the moment. So it's not clear cut as to what might be happening out there in the market. But there's some evidence that indicates that young professional tenants say that they prefer to live in a house share, for the following reasons. It's more affordable and all the bills are included, so it's all in the price. Less hassle for them. They don't have to go and set up accounts for the gas, the electricity, the water, the internet connection, or the whatever. It's all in the price. Easy to cope with. The property is already usable, ready to go. It's furnished and it's equipped. It's got freezers, it's got cookers, it's got cupboards. It's got everything the person needs. It's got a bed, a chest of drawers, a wardrobe, a desk. It's got an internet connection in their room, or at least a good wireless connection. I don't use wireless connections in HMOs. I wire the place. But it's ready to go. There's no hassle. So if I'm going to apply for a job, so I've just finished a year doing my probationary year for a company, and they say, look, we'd like you to go and work in this factory over here. Go and find if you went and found an HMO, you can go straight in and it's all done for you. They like that. It's key. They'd like to share with others. Some surveys have been around that they don't want to be on their own in a small 1-bedroom flat. They could go and rent it, but then they've got to pay council tax. They've got to set up their electricity, their gas. It's all included in the price. They also get to meet new people because, once they've left university or left college or whatever, or they're moving to a new area in the country because the job has moved them there, they get to meet a new group of disparate people. Maybe they work at the same company, maybe they don't. So it's a great way. And they become mates. And when they become mates, they gel. Hopefully they gel. I can tell you a few stories where they didn't, but we won't go there today. So if there's a need to move, it's easier to find places to stay. You just go online, you look at HMOs, you go to spareroom.com and you find that there's HMO rooms to be had. And you'll find that it's one room in an HMO is being advertised, and there are 4, maybe 5 other people there. So you get to meet new people. So also, you may be saying, well, I need to settle down. I'm quite happy to buy my flat now. I've done my saving up. Gosh, and don't you have to save hard these days? To find somewhere more permanent, you go and live in an HMO for 6 months, and it gives you time to go and look around, because people are getting very picky about the sort of properties that they want to live in. They can go and research an area. They can live nearby an area. It's nice and convenient. Gone are the days when, you get young 24, 25, 26, 27-year-olds generally going and buying their own property, unless they come into some inheritance or, the parents are very generous. Now, not always. Parents are very generous these days. There isn't the money out there. Now, the only time I'm going to use any numbers, I went and had a look at the English Housing Survey, because I'm a boring old so-and-so. And You know, home ownership's at a 30-year low. The private rented sector has increased. There you are. There were 2.8 million renters in 2007, and today there are 4.5 million. Now that's all rented sector. I couldn't find anything specifically about HMOs, but it's increased, and it's increased by 63%. Younger households are more likely to rent privately than older households. And in 27, the 25 to 34 age group represented the largest group. Now, interestingly, the council, when they started to look at shared room rates rather than one-bedroom flat rates in the local authority renting scheme, you know, the amount that they'll pay on benefit, it jumped from 25 before you could get a one-bed flat and they would pay for it to 35. And this affected a lot of blokes. And I've got a couple of I don't normally let HMOs to social housing tenants. I would lease that property to a housing association, but I wouldn't necessarily manage it through my letting agent. Anyway, some of the letting agents won't manage social housing tenants anyway. And all my tenants, they might be in receipt of some benefit, but they would be working. They would be working. So, you know, it's a big group of people, and the 25 to 34 is no stranger, because the age before you could claim benefit for a one-bedroom flat was raised to 35, probably 6 or 7 years ago now. But people are getting older, and we're now seeing an increase of between 10 and 15%. That are looking for this, and it's usually it's older single people that are going down this particular route. Now, if they're going into a house, so if it's a family, then they tend to spend a lot longer there. I mean, I've had tenants in some of my buy-to-let houses for 14, 15 years now. I think if I've got one tenant, if I'm thinking about what's his name, Keith. Yeah, Keith in one of my properties in South Wales has been there since the day I bought the house, which was in 2003. He's still there. He's still paying the rent, and he's a great tenant. Fantastic. I haven't been able to see him this year because I haven't been able to get into Wales, but there we go. It's important that you'll know that in HMOs you are going to have a higher turnover of tenants. I used to do students. I don't do them anymore. I don't do students at all in any of my HMOs. That's not the game for me these days. But they were there for the whole year, and in fact, I normally kept them for 2 years. But by gum, you've got to have your maintenance sorted out if you have those. They give you some horror stories. Again, that's for another time. Got all this information from the Office for National Statistics. So, also there's a restriction. So in the 30 years between 59 and 88, which is not 30 years, it's 29. But anyway, 7.4 million houses were built in England. And in the 30 years from 89 to 2018, only half were built. That means there's a shortfall of houses. Where are these people going to live? And it's generally in rented accommodation. So HMOs are still going to be popular, especially for temporary and short-term accommodation. In 2018, the licensing was extended to 5 people, and those aren't included. Those figures are not included in these figures that I got from the House of Commons briefing paper from 2019, because this predated the time when they extended to 5. It used to be 5 people over 3 floors. Now it's just 5 people. And there were 500,000 HMOs in England and Wales, and there were more in Scotland. But of course, the House of Commons doesn't produce anything about Scotland. So HMOs can therefore contribute to alleviating the housing shortage. Some councils have introduced Article 4, specifically and more generally in high student populated areas, because there's a conservation planning restriction for turning a residential house into an HMO without planning permission. In other words, the council are wanting to keep tabs on how many HMOs and also the number of flats as well that are in a specific area. So it's more difficult for landlords to create a new HMO, but it's not impossible. One of my mentees has just done it in Portsmouth with my help. The whole area is Article 4, extending in Portsea Island right out to the north of the island. It's all Article 4. We've recently got 3 or 4 through the council's planning. Councils just can't say no, but they have to publish why or how you determine whether or not you're going to get an HMO. There has to be a set of rules in place. Now, I've seen a lot of HMOs over the past 19 years, and people claiming the HMO market is saturated. Usually it's because they have substandard properties. To be honest, ladies and gentlemen, and forgive my French, it's crap. The properties are dirty, filthy, completely not maintained. You know, I've seen mattresses where people obviously don't use sheets. Now, we don't want to go there. Too much information, you're saying. All these people don't have HMOs at all, and a lot of estate agents are like this. Oh, we don't do HMOs around here because they don't know. It's unsubstantiated opinion. To me, the HMO market is still buoyant. It's not saturated. Now, there may be areas where you wouldn't want to put an HMO, and very often you'll find that the rents are incredibly low because the properties are just not up to standard. So I think that's key. Okay, let's have a look at some of the factors affecting HMOs. And I put tenants first of all, and I'm going to use this again. Before you buy a property that you're going to turn into an HMO, check demand, and check demand again. I've certainly bought an HMO. I bought one in the Northeast, or several in the Northeast, that were brilliant 10 years ago, but you wouldn't put one there today because the industry where most of the tenants came from has gone. So you must maintain a view in terms of demand. And for that, we use a number of different websites. We also talk to independent letting / management agents. Some people call them managing agents, some people call them letting agents. They're the same thing. You've got council tax now in some counties being charged per room. And if they've got a kitchenette and an ensuite, even more chance that they'll be totally self-contained, classed as a bedsit, and you're going to get council tax. Not every council's doing that. They all have the ability, but they don't necessarily invoke it. I've got a workaround. I don't use en suites. I've got an 8-bedroomed HMO, and there's 8 toilets, 8 showers. Oh, they're not all in the same room, I hasten to add, because communal bathing isn't normally the way I like to play things. But anyway, the en suites are not en suite. There's a one bathroom. The door leads to the common area, so therefore it's a shared bathroom, but it's dedicated to a room. Some of the rooms have en suites, usually the upstairs ones, but so the rooms downstairs that were living areas, when it was a home, I don't put en suites in those. And that means that the council tax people won't come anywhere near me because I've got, it's usual to have en suites in bedrooms, but it's not normal to have en suites in living rooms and dining rooms. And then you're materially changing the home into an HMO. Then there's Article 4, where you need planning for any HMO. Article 4 is 3 people or more, you have to go to planning. The sui generis is you already need planning for sui generis. So once you go 7 people or more than 6, you have to go for planning anyway. And that's a sui generis, a large HMO. Now, I said that I was going to give you a warning. HMOs do require more maintenance than a buy-to-let, and it can be significantly more. So you need to build up a pot of money over time, and you need to include that in your cash flow. It's difficult to know how much, And we have a pot which is called the maintenance pot, and that usually stands at around about £4,000 or £5,000. Obviously, it dribbles down, and then we start to top it up again, and we try to keep a sort of an average of £3,000-4,000 in it. And when you've got 5 or 6, maybe 7 to 10 HMOs, you're going to burn through that amount of money. So take it into account. Be warned. Now, most people don't do due diligence. Absolutely, they don't know. So I'm going to talk about tenants again. I'm going to say demand, demand, demand. If you can't see the demand in a place, don't buy an HMO there. If there's no big industry, I'm not stopping you from going down the student route, but if there are no students, then there's no demand from them. So we don't. I live in Torbay. South Devon College has 120 students doing degree courses from Plymouth University. It's not enough to benefit an HMO. We have a lot of people that work in and around the holiday industry, which can be fairly seasonal, and they want a place to live, and so we'll do professional HMOs there. So use local independent letting and management agents. Go to Spare Room, do a check on Spare Room. Talk to the Department of Human, I nearly said Remains then, but Department of Human Resources in the industry nearby you. Go to the hospital accommodation offices. Go to the accommodations department of the university and find out whether or not they do want external HMOs. A lot of universities are building their own stuff these days. Research an area, but go there. Look at the streets. Don't go to a place where 5 or 6 people are not going to be safe at night. Check the council website for existing licensed HMOs. Where are they all pocketed? Are there any? The information is public domain. Now, I was told the other day that York want to charge £500 for them to issue to you the existing information on where all the licensed HMOs are. So we've issued a freedom of information request, and they have to send it to us. They will only email it. I'm not paying £500 for what is public domain software. The council. Go to council-run landlord forums. Get to know other landlords, because that's where they go. And actually, we've bought several HMO from other landlords who are fed up to the back teeth of legislation. Now, I think buy-to-let is this big, and HMOs are that big. It's certainly not a doubling or a tripling. It's just that bit on the end does incur a lot of penalties. Very, very punitive system. Get to know your HMO officer and get involved if it's local to you. I used to be chair of Newport landlords. Guess who was the first person to find out about grants? Guess who was the first person to find out about impending legislation? That's because I met with the senior HMO officer for the council. We sat down, we drank coffee together, and we sorted out what we were going to say. And I did all the presenting. Well, mind you, I love presenting. So,
really?
About exit strategies. You might have to sell someday if circumstances change, and you can revert back to residential house reasonably quickly. Check your property values on a regular basis. What else could you do with the property to enhance its use if HMOs are not needed due to changes in the area? Exit strategy is important. You can't forget it. You may have an HMO, most of my HMOs I've had for 14, 15 years now, but, I've had to sell 1 or 2. Go to local business meetings if you can. Can you raise finance? Make sure the property still works if you're raising capital from other sources. People often forget, they're paying a mortgage and then they're paying back an investor who's lent them some money. If that property starts to fall over, not literally, of course, but if it starts to fall over financially, how are you going to pay back your investor? It needs to be thought about. It's all part of the due diligence. It needs to work well. In fact, I would say you need to know what your break-even position is. How many tenants do you need in your property for your cash flow to be 0, but you've paid all the bills and you've paid the mortgage? Whoop, sorry about that. Might have to go back. Licensing, we've spoken about it. There's mandatory, 5 or more people. Some councils will introduce additional licensing and some will have selective licensing. Additional licensing is like they have in Newport in South Wales, where every property that's an HMO has to be licensed. In selective licensing, that may not have anything to do with HMOs. I mean, Newham has got selective licensing for buy-to-let property. So just be aware that there may be, you've got to have a mandatory license. If you've got 5 or more people, you have no choice, but there are other schemes as well out there, and you can talk to your local council. That's why you need to get to know to your HMO officer to find out if there's additional or selective licensing. Standards, it's a huge topic, and look, in order to get your license, your HMO has to be fit for purpose and safe to live in. All council websites, ladies and gentlemen, if there are licensable HMOs in that area, will have a complete set of standards that you need to meet. Now, I run an HMO course, and that takes 2.5 days to go through all of this stuff, and it's not a place for it to do it today. But it is something you need to understand, that there are specific standards you have to meet in order to turn your property into an HMO. If you don't need a license, the standards are still the same. And if a tenant gets injured or dies, you could be in trouble because they'll come and inspect you anyway. So I'm not going to talk about standards. And I'm not really going to talk about property, other than to say, in my humble opinion, and it is only my opinion, your property should be managed by a reputable letting or management agent. I do not want the day-to-day hassle of dealing with a tenant that's lost a key, a tenant that's got a dripping tap, a tenant that does this, a tenant that does that. And some of the maintenance is quite troublesome. You know, I've lived in the house that I live in today for 6 years now. I've never had a dripping tap. Funny, tenant will go in and within a week there's a dripping tap. They'll say the water is gushing down the stairs. They will break something. It's inevitable when you've got a lot of people living in a property that don't know each other and really couldn't care less about each other, or even care what goes into the common parts of a property. They don't think it's anything to do with them. And there are management regulations that are legal as well. Now, I'm in favour of the smaller HMOs to medium HMOs. I don't like having lots of people. I like to spread my risk. And I've given an example here of a 6-bed HMO where 2 occupants pay the mortgage, 2 pay the bills, and 2 put cash in your pocket. It's a great way to think. But how many tenants can you lose before you start to be having to pay for the HMO rather than it pays you? Too large, and there could be people issues. A friend of mine who has presented on my HMO course recently bought a 29-bed HMO. It was students, no students last year, complete loss. Okay, he's managed to get some professionals in there now, but he's not making anywhere near the amount of money he should be. So I like to spread my risk. I'd rather have 10 6-bedders than 1 60-bedder. You also get the people dynamics issue. You get one bad apple in a property, and it's not the one bad apple that wants to leave, it's the others. Now, I know that can happen in a 6-bed HMO, but a 6-bed HMO is not going to be the same sort of cost as a 29, 30, 35, 40 bedder. So I don't like them, but that's me. A lot of people think, oh, I'd rather have one property and it makes me all the money I need. What happens if it goes wrong? Now, valuation. Get a good broker. Even better, get 2. I have several brokers that I can approach. Can you get HMO mortgages for your first property? Yes, you can. But mortgage rates are generally higher for first-timers, and because they're perceived to be a higher risk because they haven't managed one before. But hang on a minute, you're going to put it in the hands of a reputable managing agent. Make sure that they know that's what's going to happen. Now, all lenders have different criteria, hence the need for a good broker. I wrote part of the original software for, wasn't Mortgage Brain, it was the other one. Dear me, doesn't matter. You've heard it often, though, I suspect, that you think that getting a commercial mortgage based on the rental income is better than a bricks and mortar. That is not necessarily the case. Two reasons. Firstly, the rates are higher. Secondly, you don't always get a great loan to value. Could be as low as 60%. And thirdly, it's not always interest only. You went to Lloyd's Bank, for instance, they wouldn't give you an interest-only loan on a commercial basis. It will be capital and interest in all probability. They might give you a year on interest only, but then they're going to want you to start paying it back. And also, you would end up doing it over a shorter term. And the shorter term, the higher the payment. So, and it's also area dependent. So down here, we're more likely to get 9 times valuation, 9 times annual rent valuation on a property. Stoke-on-Trent, 7. So it's area dependent. You might not get what you expect from a commercial, but again, it's doing your due diligence. You may also find that getting a commercial mortgage will require lots of valuation. So every 5 years, they'll come along and revalue the portfolio, especially if you've got a portfolio mortgage, and I've got 2 of those. They come along and every 5 years, and they wanted a valuation in 2008. You know, everybody knows what happens in 2008. We had a big downturn in, you know, the banks lost a lot of money. The world went into a financial meltdown. And all of a sudden, the lender started to come around and saying, we've downvalued your property and you're now in breach of your mortgage conditions. We want our money back. So commercial mortgages can sometimes be dangerous. And so sometimes it's better to think about the bricks and mortar. Or perhaps you go to a mixed, sort of a semi-commercial lender. I hesitate to mention any names because I'm not saying they're good or they're bad or they're indifferent. You know, KRBS will give you an enhanced valuation based upon some of the rent sometimes, but they'll take an individual look at your HMOs. Well, I've come to the nearly at the end. I'm not saying this is everybody's cup of tea, guys. I just found 3 random pictures in presentations that I've seen in the past. And you need to give your property some style. I am not saying that what you can see is style, but it's not just a mattress. You can see that somebody's thought about the way they've presented their room. Duvets, cushions, teddy bears, plates laid out. None of these are mine, but I'm just telling you, you need, I mean, I'm interested to know as to why they went for that style of zigzaggy thing. I'm getting cross-eyed just looking at it. But style it out a little bit. You need to cultivate a bit of a brand image. And there you'll see lots of people that do HMOs now, giving it some style. I mean, obviously, in the pictures here, you can see grey as the in colour. Well, it is, or it was. Don't know, it could be blue next year. It could be pink the year after. It doesn't really matter. But, you know, they've styled it out a little bit. They've staged the property to make it look like it would make a great place to live. So you need to do this when you're looking at it. And I said it earlier, you need to ensure that your properties are better than the competitions. And if they're better than the competitions, you're more liable to fill it first. And that's what you want, a full HMO, giving you oodles of cash flow.
David.
And that's it, guys. Yes.
David, is this a good point to tell you all about my latest HMO?
I think it would be a fantastic time.
I just tell you very quickly about my latest HMO. It is 11 beds. Yeah, and I am not exaggerating when I tell you what I'm going to tell you, right? It is owned and managed by a 66-year-old lady. It is the nicest HMO, the best looking HMO I've ever been in all my life. And bear in mind, I've been mentoring for about 9, almost 10 years now. And I have seen a lot of HMOs all over the country. It's the best HMO I've ever been in. Yeah. To the point where they pay between 125 and 135 pounds a week. The shortest tenant that lives in there in terms of time that they've been there has been in there 6 years. Everyone else has been there much longer. All the carpets, including the hallway, are a sort of very, very pale cream. And the lady that runs it makes the tenants take their shoes off at the door, outside the front door, and put these shoe coverings that you use, that carpet fitters and people like that use, over their socks before they go into the property. It is an amazing HMO, and quite the reason I'm telling you is because it is only 600 yards from where Mr. Harwood is, or Dr. Harwood, sorry, is sat at this moment in time. It's in Paynton on the south coast, and it is just up the road from him. And I find that absolutely ironical. Fortunately, it's already got a license, so he's not going to make an objection to the fact that there's 11 people in. So yeah, that's the latest one. In fact, Wayne knows all about it as well, because we're doing we're doing an option swap on with the lady that owns it on a bungalow. But David, are you going to take a few questions?
I can do that.
Yeah. Oh, can I just say hello to Mrs. Towers? Hello. I've not seen you for a long time. Jean, wow. Right. All yours then, David.
Okay. Do I lease my furniture? I didn't, but I do now. And we use a company called Landlord Smart. A lady called Tracy runs it. We get our furniture from Barry White owns a furniture company, but I've never bought from him. So, but there we go. But that's because I haven't done that for a while. But there are many companies out there, Fusion and people like that, where you can get furniture packs. We lease it. We get lent the money. We buy the furniture packs in, and then at the end of 3 years, you have the choice of either getting rid of the furniture. I hope my furniture lasts more than 3 years. I've certainly been in cases where it doesn't. Yeah, so we lease our furniture, and we get a capital gains reduction as no, not capital gains, a corporation tax relief on the leasing, and it becomes, because we're leasing it, it becomes revenue expenditure and not not capital. Can I say more about council tax liability and who it sits with? Yes, I can. If you have an HMO, you as the landlord, as the owner of the property, have to pay the council tax. You have no choice. That's where it is. Then the council aren't going to write to each individual tenant. And anyway, none of them would say that they're responsible because they've just got a room. So that's the requirement for council tax. You as the landlord pay it. The relationship to en-suites. Now, this is really, really tricky because some councils, I know, for instance, that Burton-on-Trent are now saying, if your room has an ensuite, you're going to get charged council tax per room. But they can only do that if the house has been materially changed from a home into an HMO. So they've been and put en-suites in what was the living room, what was the dining room, and they've even put an ensuite by that, and so every single room has an ensuite. We don't do that. So our en-suites are typically off of bedrooms, but the living room downstairs, the dining room, we're going to find somewhere to place another bathroom, which will be shared for the rooms downstairs. Because now I've not materially changed my HMO from a home into a house of multiple occupancy, an HMO. Because at any instant, I could get somebody just to buy it as an ordinary house. May not be what I want to do, but I'm thinking about my exit strategy, but I'm also thinking about my day-to-day running. Now, you cannot charge your tenant additional rent of £100 a month to cover the council tax payment. Council tax band A is typically about £100 a month, wherever you are in the country. So therefore, if you're making profit of £150 per room per month, it's now £50. That's going to dramatically affect your return on investment. So check the council out to see whether or not they're going to do this, and under what circumstances can the valuation office agency, because it's not councils that charge the council tax, but the valuation office agency set it. They can't set it for me because we don't have en suites. I've been told by letting agents, oh, it's got to have en suites, otherwise we can't let it. Funny, I don't have any, and I'm almost fully let. There might be 1 or 2 rooms that are empty, but we're almost fully let.
I think the other thing, David, is that people, and we see it in the sourcing company, and Sam will sort of, and Janette will back me up on this. We see investors, even international investors, that are paying through the nose for the HMO because landlords are selling them. And of course, they want far more than what they paid for them.
Yeah.
And secondly, their refurbishments now, some of the refurbishments are eye-watering because investors are putting en suites into every room. And we've got investors that are spending £70,000, £80,000, £90,000 even on putting ensuite bathrooms into 6-7 bed HMOs that are just, they are just going to never ever get their money back. They're never going to get the money out of that HMO.
No, and I think the other thing is, who do you sell it to if the HMO market falls through? Where's your exit strategy? Because it's going to cost you a lot of money to take all those en suites out. Yeah. Probably almost as much as what it costs to put them in the first place.
Absolutely.
So you need to think about that. Sui generis, it's more than 6 people. The council do not care how many rooms you've got, but they do care about people, because under HHSRS, overcrowding is the issue, not the number of rooms, but the number of people. So it's greater than 6 people. So if there's a house with 6 bedrooms and 8 people, it's sui generis. You would need planning permission, absolutely. Now, I've got a little bit of a story there. So I've got somebody who put in for sui generis this was in London, outer London, and he wanted to put in for 7 people, and everybody objected because he went to planning permission, as he should do. And of course, they got put up on lampposts, letters were sent to all the nearest neighbours, and everybody objected. And I said, well, does the HMO work for 6 people? And he went, yeah, it does. I just don't get as much money. So I said, well, your cash flow is £1,800 a month for 6 people. Be satisfied with that for about a year, 18 months, then put in your planning permission to go for the more people. And when the people object to say, well, we don't want HMO around here, you say, well, it has been one for the last 18 months. It gives the council a lot more armory to say, well, it's already an HMO. Nobody is guaranteed anything through planning. Planning is a horrible department to deal with at times. When marketing, do you stage all your rooms? No, we don't. No, I'm not going to spend a lot of money staging the whole HMO. We stage the kitchen, we stage the bathroom, and we stage one of the bedrooms. By the way, and those are the ones we show. Those are the ones we take pictures of. You can stage everything if you so wish. By the way, when somebody takes the room, you take all the staging out. They can furnish it whatever way they want.
David.
Yeah.
Directly under you, I don't know if everyone else has got the photographs, the pictures, and the videos in the same place, but directly under you is one of my students, Martin. Give us a wave, Martin. Martin, man, give us a wave. Yeah.
Oh, hello, Martin. Oh, you're up in the top right corner for me.
Martin's actually got a business where he can do they can do virtual staging and virtual sort of views on properties. So
there we go.
You don't even need to go in with a mask and some sanitizer to stage properties now. You do it virtually. So, David, we're running out of time, I'm afraid. We've got one last question that you can ask, and then we'll move on.
Okay. Let me think. There's one here. Our new HMO is C3 to C4, and I have council email confirming that they're happy for us to run it as an HMO before we bought it. We now have a certificate of completion from the local authority building control and have applied for a license. Yes, well, that just to show that you can get C3 to C4. The neighbours are complaining. Well, once you've got the certificate of completion, and you know, there's very little for them to complain about, because if the council have basically said it's okay, then you should be fine. It's very, you know, these questions are all great. Well, there's another one here I'll quickly answer. I always buy my HMOs untenanted. I find my own tenants, not personally, but I like to take properties over vacant possession. That's my business model. If the tenants were great, by the way, what landlord is not going to tell you their tenants were great by referencing? But if normally I would want them to sign new tenancy agreements. I definitely want the bonds transferred to my name, and you need somebody who's practiced at getting the tenants over to you. I think one of my Steve Rogers. Steve, give us a wave, mate. There we go. Yeah, that's Steve. I'm mentoring Steve at the moment, and he's just taken over a property that already had tenants in. Is that? Just give us a nod, Steve. Yeah. But he was dealing with a guy who's very, very experienced at managing the tenants over to him, and that's what you need. But if you're a newbie, it might be worthwhile you taking your HMO on in terms of it being vacant possession. Anyway, you might want to do it up, because if you're buying an HMO or transferring to an HMO, the property is going to have to be empty anyway for you to refurbish it. Okay, Barry.
Okay, thank you very much, David. Give David a virtual round of applause, everyone, as usual. Thank you, David. Right, we're going to have a short advertising break. Don't go anywhere. We're going to have a short advertising break before I bring Wayne in, because I've got something very special, very dear to my heart, I want to tell you about, which is this. Yeah. So I have written a book. I mean, for those that don't know, that I've over the last few years I've been studying psychology and neuro-linguistic programming. The importance of being able to communicate and speak to people and negotiate with people is so important with the way the market is going at the moment. So I thought I would sit down and I would write a book. Now, through the National Property Networks, what I would like to do is get you all a copy of this, one way or the other, whether it's physical or whether it's physical or whether it's on Kindle, on Amazon. I would like you all to sort of have a read of this. But before I do that, before I get all the books printed, and it will be out, I think, at the end of May, last week in May, first week of June, it will be available. I'd like people to start registering their interest for the book. Yeah. So if you can do that by going onto the website, and that's the link to the registration, you'll get an email back saying thanks for registering. As soon as the book's ready, yeah, we will let you know, and we'll let you know what the launch date is. So it's a project that is very, very dear to my heart, because it's taken an awful lot of time to sort of come together. But I know that you will find it very, very useful, and there are things in there that you wouldn't even dream of that we do, that we don't do when we're speaking to people, when we're negotiating, etc., etc., etc. So it's there. It's not going to cost you anything to register. It's http://bit.ly/ppn book. All you've got to do is go onto that link, Janette, if you can put the link into the chat box and put it through to everyone, please. Then if you're interested, register. You get an email straight back saying that we will let you know when the book's ready for launching. I would love everyone to sort of get a copy. I'm going to have to sell the copy, otherwise it doesn't work on Amazon, but it's going to be very, very cheap. Yeah, very, very cheap. Bear in mind, I'm a Yorkshireman, so but it'll be probably less than a fiver, I would have thought. So please register your interest. I'd be really appreciative if you did that, just so I can get some sort of idea of numbers. Okay, I'll stop the share on that, and I will hand you over to Mr. Gray. Before I do that, I'd better make Wayne a co-host, if I haven't done already.
Nope, not yet.
Right, you've got about 15 minutes, Wayne.
You do me proud, thanks mate. I'll rush it through.
Don't blame me.
Hey, you don't want to see that yet? Right, here we go. Hey guys, I think most of you know me, but for those of you that don't, a whistle-stop tour of who I am and who DMI are. I'm Wayne Gray. I'm the MD of DMI Finance, and we're a commercial mortgage brokerage arranging finance for investors. So you guys, essentially. We've been trading for 20 years. I've been here 15 years, almost. And yeah, as I say, we specialize in all forms of property finance, buy-to-let, HMO, quite apt, of course, for tonight, commercial mortgages, bridging, conversion, development, you know, the works really, anything that an investor may well want to do. So normal kind of slot for me today. I'll give you a brief market update and then perhaps concentrate on HMOs. And in my view, the two real main valuations, that being a bricks and mortar valuation and a commercial valuation or investment valuation, and give you an indication as to how a lender or what a lender looks for, or a valuer more so, in whether they'll provide a bricks and mortar valuation or whether they'll provide an investment valuation. So mortgage market news, what changes have we seen since I last presented a month ago? The number of holiday let products are on the rise. Quite significant data out earlier this week. Now 149 holiday let products in the market, available from 21 different lenders. Now, if I take that back to October last year, there are 103 from 17 lenders. And if I go right back to August last year, there are 74 offered by 14 lenders. So, you know, it's no real surprise, I'm sure. It certainly isn't to me, with the amount of staycations and people holidaying in the UK, but it's a good move. And for those of you that are in the holiday let or serviced accommodation market, it's a really strong move. Significant criteria changes. Well, we've seen Pepper Money or Pepper, I said here Pepper Home Loans. I think it's Pepper Money, they're actually called, sorry about that, have introduced a limited edition 3.18% 5-year fixed rate for limited companies. It is the market leader for limited company 5-year fixed rates at 75% LTV now. And that's really interesting because Pepper Money haven't been up there ever. You know, for them to come back or come in with a market leading rate is really, really good. The mortgage works. I mentioned last time about green schemes. A lot of lenders coming into green schemes with HMO, with EPC changes coming into play perhaps in 2025. A lot of lenders coming in with green schemes. The mortgage works have released their particular flavor on the green scheme, which is for further advances. So for people that have mortgages with the mortgage works already, TMW have launched a further advanced product at 1.48%, really, really competitive for borrowing of up to £15,000 for you to use specifically for the purposes of enhancing the property, the EPC of the property. But really, really competitive rates. I mentioned last month about TML and precise mortgages increasing their minimum loan size to £75,000. It was a bit of a smack in the mouth for those that invest at the lower end of the market. It's interesting that Landbay have now reduced their minimum loan size. Their minimum loan size used to be £75,000. Earlier this month, they reduced it to £65,000. Vida has significantly improved their service levels, and they've reintroduced 80% loan to value products. And Kensington Mortgages has introduced a rate at 2.59%, market leader, 2.59% for limited company 2-year fixed rates. Now, I mean, that really is quite significant. Its nearest competitor, which I'll show on the next few screens, is I think Precise at 2.79. But before Precise came into that market, probably 2 months ago, you'd struggle to see a rate of less than 3% for a limited company 2-year fixed. So it's really competitive. HMO funding. Well, we've picked the 3 main questions here that we're often asked about HMO funding, and I appreciate there might be some overlap in what David has said already. But the main questions that we get asked are, what's a lender's appetite? Will a lender lend to me? I don't have much experience. Or what experience does a lender have? Experience requirements does a lender have? Will the valuation that I obtain be a bricks and mortar valuation or an investment valuation? And then I guess, what rates can I secure? Am I looking at a significant premium for the rate that I'm likely to borrow? And I'll go through those points briefly with you. Now, what letting experience do I require? Well, as David alluded to earlier, you don't have to have any letting experience to be able to get an HMO mortgage. There are limitations, and that's not with a wide spectrum of lenders. It's very few lenders that will lend on that basis. But the truth of the matter is that those lenders that will, say, namely Kent Reliance, the rates aren't excessive. They're not much more than you'd ever get with the very most competitive HMO lender, but they will lend even with no experience in letting property. The majority of lenders, though, will want lettings experience, and that really varies. To get the most options out there, I'd suggest 12 months letting experience for a smaller HMO. Some lenders will do it at 6 months. Other lenders go right up to 3 years, but it's a big spectrum. But with 12 months letting experience, you'll be eligible for the majority of products. So, to my mind, and there are hybrid valuations that sit within this, but really you have 2 different types of valuation. You have your bricks and mortar valuation, and you have your investment valuation. And to put it very simply, a bricks and mortar valuation is the value of the property as a home. Okay, the traditional way of valuing the property, the value as a standard residential dwelling. And an investment valuation, slightly different. It takes into consideration the yield of the property. Now, if we break that down, what are the factors that are likely to be considered in whether I'm able to secure an investment valuation or whether it's going to be a bricks and mortar valuation? And I think the most important thing to understand here is that if that property, and I put it at the bottom here, if the property, in the event of repossession, because every lender looks at that, worst case scenario is they repossess the property, it gets sold. Who will buy it? If that property is to be sold as a house, then the reality is, then that's what they'll value it as. And that's the valuation. It's going to be a bricks and mortar valuation in most circumstances. If it is that it could sell to an investor, or is more likely to sell to an investor, then perhaps you're erring towards the investment valuation. And the things that come into that would be, what's its planning class? Anything that hinders somebody else buying the neighboring property. The ultimate scenario is that you've got an HMO. You want to go in and get an investment valuation, and you think it's worth, a multiple of its rent. Well, that's all fine. But if someone can buy next door and do exactly what you've done to your property, for a substantial amount less than they can buy yours for, well, why on earth would they ever buy yours? So it's about those limiting factors and about the size and sophistication of the property. So, it's planning use. If it's, a standard property, or you've converted it within permitted development right to an HMO, and there's no Article 4 directive in the area, and it's only 6 occupants, well then, what's stopping somebody else doing the exact same next door? However, if it's sui generis, so 7 occupants, then you've gone that step further than someone else might want to. You've gone and got the planning. There's an enhancement that you've brought about. The property size, the number of bedrooms. The size and sophistication of the property is very important. If it is that you own a 6-bedroom property with 3 en suites in a row of 6-bed properties with 3 en suites, well then, and the rest are all houses, well then why is yours worth any more than theirs? It's not going to be. But if it is that your property is perhaps more dissimilar to the other properties in the same street, then you may well be encouraging a lender to lend on an investment valuation. I've said at the top here, though, one point to understand is that not all lenders will do so. Some lenders that will lend on an HMO all day long will only ever lend on a bricks and mortar valuation. HMO valuations are not part of their repertoire. But that said, there are many lenders that it is, and that are very comfortable with it. Sustainability and demand is a big thing. Just because you're achieving it now, is there another HMO? Student accommodation being a case in point. Is a university creating university dwellings on campus? And is very aware of that, in which case is it going to take the demand away from your property? But as I say, the ultimate thing, if it's a house with a bed in the living room, which effectively, will only ever be sold as a house, or that hasn't been specifically or significantly adapted, then you'll probably not get an investment valuation. Now, kind of moving on from that, a bricks and mortar valuation. And look, these points aren't mutually exclusive. So don't think, oh, well, if I've got a 6-tenant property, I can't get an investment valuation, because it's not necessarily the case. These things often sit in the grey. I've had as I say, a 6-bedroom house with 4 en suites that hasn't commanded an investment valuation. I've had a 7-bed house with 3 or 4 en suites that hasn't commanded an investment valuation. It's not absolutely guaranteed, but you can be pretty confident that the less sophisticated the property is, the more unrealistic an investment valuation is. So smaller, less adapted properties, a standard dwelling layout that is likely to be sold as a standard dwelling. If it's not in an Article 4 directive area, of course, if it's in an Article 4 area, it's potentially preventing other people from doing the exact same. They can't buy next door's house and do what you've done, unless they want to apply for planning and get it declined. They have to potentially pay a premium for yours. The number of tenants, and I say that because ultimately, if it's 7 tenants, if you've gone down the sui generis route, then it's going to deter some people from doing what you've done, from putting in the legwork, and if it's likely to be sold as a home. Now, investment valuation, well, a commercial investment valuation tends to be higher than a bricks and mortar valuation, and it can be beneficial in some instances, certainly in that a borrower might be able to borrow more against the property, but there's potential risk, as David alluded to there. The other benefit would be if you're not borrowing more money, you can potentially reduce the loan to value that you'd be looking at against the commercial valuation, potentially reducing the interest rates. So take, for example, you've got a property, £150,000 as its bricks and mortar valuation, 75% borrowing against that is 112, but you think it's actually worth I don't know, based on its yield, it's worth £190,000 on an investment valuation. Well, effectively, then you're not borrowing 75% of the bricks and mortar had you gone to lender A. You're borrowing 52% of the 190 with lender B. It can, it's of course, I say somewhat artificial, but it can reduce the rates. What's likely to be considered relevant for a valuer, for a lender? Well, really they're looking for larger, specifically adapted properties. Does it have en suites? And I appreciate that might bring other issues with the VOA. If you're putting en suites and everything, look, if you've got an ensuite in a living room, is that ever going to be sold back as a house? If you've got, the downstairs room and they have en suites in, probably not. It would certainly benefit you potentially from an investment valuation, but two sides of the coin. If that then means that the valuations office banned you for kind of individual council tax, then it might not be too advantageous. Multiple kitchens, or multiple sinks in a kitchen, multiple, do you have a kind of a laundry room with 4, or a couple of washing machines, a couple of dryers? Is it specifically configured that property really is a commercial investment? Sui generis planners, as we've said, and if it's likely to be sold to an investor and unlikely to be sold as a standard home. Now, look, I've lost count of the amount of times that people have come to me, and I'm not an HMO valuer, and I don't want to get too deep on the subject, but the amount of times that people have come to me and said, is it right, Wayne, we want the commercial valuation, and because it's going to be 8 times the gross rent, or whatever, 10 times the gross rent, 8 times the net rent. It's not quite that simple. Okay, they don't lend on a multiplier. It really isn't that simple. The reality is they're looking at the yield of the area, and that yield will differ whether it's in Yorkshire, Swindon, Manchester, or Bournemouth. So it's the yield that they're looking for. Now, of course, if you use a calculator and you say, okay, well, it's a 10% yield, well, 10 times 10 is 100, so you might be able to work back from that, but it's not the multiplier that they're looking at. It is the yield of the property. I hope that makes some sense to you, but they're really the kind of two simplistic kind of whistle-stop tour of how lenders will and a valuer may decipher the difference. Headline rates as at today, and I'm not sure really there's significant change other than a couple of select products in here since we last spoke. I think that 1.59% rate, Barry, with TMW for personal names at 75% has remained there probably since last July. It's a market leader, personal name. The reality is it's probably not getting much bite because not that many people are buying perhaps in personal names, but 2.2-year fixed, 1.59 personal name at 75%. It's a market leader. You've then got the 2-year fixed at 2.59, which is that sneaky Kensington rate that I mentioned earlier today. Really, really competitive. Look, it comes with a pretty vicious arrangement fee. I think the arrangement fee is in the thousands. I think it's in fact 3,000 or 4,000, but they'll lend up to £750,000 borrowing. So if you're borrowing a £750,000 loan with a £3,000 or £4,000 lender arrangement fee, actually, that's equating to a 0.5% arrangement fee. It's very competitive. You've then got 2.79 with let's have a look, 2.79 at limited company SPV at 75%. And then you've got the HMO rate starting. I think that's precise at 2.89%. Then quickly on to the 5-year rates, starting in personal names for standard property at 1.99%. Then you've got that Pepper Money rate at 3.18%, really, really competitive limited company rate. And then the cheapest HMO rates in the market, or multi-unit freehold block, multi-unit properties, starting at around about 3.59%. And, I thought I'd just highlight some of the kind of nuances or USPs that we have. A lot of people don't think that they come to us if they're an experienced landlord or an inexperienced landlord. They've never owned a property, they've never bought a buy-to-let. They think they can't jump that hurdle and buy one. The reality is we help inexperienced landlords all day, every day. You do not need to own a property. You do not need to have ever owned a property. We can assist you. We can remortgage and capital raise within 6 months. Don't have to have owned the property for 6 months. If you've enhanced the value of the property, there are many lenders that will remortgage that property within the first 6 months. Flats above commercial. Our largest client's got 400 properties in Southeast London, all flats above commercial. All ex-local authority flats. Foreign nationals and expats, we assist them all day, every day. And then we do an awful lot with social housing tenancies. So if you want to get into the social housing tenancies where you're letting a property to asylum seekers or NACRO or MERS or any housing provider, then we're in a position to lend, again, with primarily standard buy-to-let type options. And that's it from me. And I hope I've made my
Thanks, Wayne. Guys, because of the time this evening, what I'm going to say, I've seen a few questions that have come through for Wayne. Some of the questions, and we struggle a little bit with questions for Wayne because most of them are very personal, and the last thing that we want to do is be discussing your personal circumstances in front of 200 other people. So all I can suggest, if you have got any questions for Wayne, right, he is very, very approachable. All of the guys at DMI are very, very approachable. Just give them a call. You have absolutely no obligation to get any advice off them or find out what they can do or what they can't do for you. And the first time I ever met Wayne, going back a few years now, the conversation went something like, I would love to refer people to a mortgage broker that not only, if they have a problem, not only gives them the problem, but also the solution. Otherwise, they don't speak to them. It's as simple as that. And that Wayne and DMI, all the guys at DMI now, led by Wayne as the managing director, is they've all got the same philosophy. They know that the majority of people that go to them have either come through the training courses or come through National Property Network Works or wherever it is. They know full well that they are inexperienced property investors, and they will hold your hand all the way through it. And that's the biggest thing. They will not sort of just send you the fact find and send you a key performance indicator on the mortgage and that's it. They'll hold your hand all the way through it. That is what they're very, very good at. That is why Wayne is on here every single month. Why? Because we totally, David and I and Janette, totally trust him, right, to look after you when you are looking for a mortgage. And he can do some things that no other mortgage brokers can. And I'll tell you the reason why. It's because he has got a very, very good relationship with most of the business development managers at the lenders that he works with. It's as simple as that. So if you have got a question, just pick up the phone, ring him. That fair to say, Wayne?
It's definitely fair, absolutely. And look, that's my email, that's my mobile, that's the office line. I can't promise I'll come back to you immediately, but we're not a 9-to-5 firm. You've got the numbers there, use them. And I think the big thing for us is it's all about strategy. And I'm sure it's a cliche. Every broker probably says the same, but it really is. We're not here to tell you, ultimately, there are scenarios that we can't help in, but you've got to make that scenario that you can help in. If we can't help you because of X, Y, and Z, we'll tell you what has to happen to be able to help you, because we're in it for the long game.
Yeah,
we're here to build relationships.
Okay, mate. Thanks a lot. Right. Okay. Thank you. As always, big thanks to Wayne. Virtual round of applause for him. Yeah. There's one person that I always forget to say thank you to, and it is very, very remiss of me. Right. That is the person that behind all of this, right, does most of the work. Yeah, does all the work, and that's Janette. So from David and myself, a big thank you to Janette. You would not believe we've had nearly 200. Well, we have had 200 people on here tonight. Yeah, which is absolutely magnificent, and we love you all to death. It really, really is good doing this for you and seeing you every month. It's absolutely brilliant. And tell your friends, right? Share the post. Tell your friends. Get on. Take photographs of it. Right. Post it on Facebook. Post it everywhere. Because we do have some good stuff on. Every single month. The other thing, guys, if you are new, right, you will get an email in the next couple of days, sort of directing you to where you can watch a video of tonight if you've missed any of it, or if you want to see it again. That is going to be available on YouTube. That's the word I was looking for. Yeah. If you've got any questions for David about HMOs or anything, send them to info@barrywhitetraining.com. If you've got any questions about National Property Network, send them to info@barrywhitetraining.com. Barry White Training, all one word. And we'd love to see you. We'd love to speak to you. And if we can help you in any way, we will. David, would you like to say good night to all of these wonderful people? 200 people we've had on tonight.
That's brilliant. Well done. And well, thank you all for listening. I hope it's been really useful for you. And I'd love to see you and love to give you the information. So great. Thanks very much, guys. And we'll see you next month.
It's been nice to see some old friends on as well, David, because I don't know if Gene Towers was on, Elba and Bruce Lassells were on, Don McCluskey's been on. It's lovely to see them all. So thanks, guys. It's lovely to see you. I've not seen you for some of you for a long, long time. So look forward to seeing you next month. Hopefully, note on the book. Someone did mention there is a copy of that book cover on Amazon. Yes, you're absolutely right. It is a sample. You do not seriously think that I'm going to show you the whole of the proper book cover that is still being designed, actually. I'm not going to tell you everything about it. I'm not going to show you the book cover. So yes, it is on Amazon. Register your interest. You will love the book. I'm sure you will. All right, guys. Have a great month. Have a great bank holiday weekend. Thanks from Wayne, David, Janette, and myself. Take care. Look after yourselves, and we'll see you in a few weeks' time. Take care. Bye bye.